defensive operations part, whatever. I got sidetracked. I didn't do a blog yesterday 'cause it was my name day. But I think it got a little complicated. I'll just deal with one front instead of a total war scenario. Um, One front's kind of easier to talk about and deal with. People, people that didn't go to West Point or a military school and went through officers training. I didn't either, but I learned all my stuff on the fly during combat because I ate with colonels, and I realized first day in the combat zone there was a lot more to war than just shooting an M16 or shooting a tank barrel or shooting an artillery piece or monitoring communications or whatever. It's a whole process. So I'll just go back to a defensive operation, discussing a linear defensive operation. Say you have two countries side by side with a parallel border running north to south. When country A attacks country B, country B is on the defensive. Country B wants to evac all his unnecessary people. You know, not people not capable of fighting, women, small children, girls. Depending on the situation, small boys, young boys. Um, Rule of thumb is any boy over 14 that can hold a gun and shoot, you keep. So you're going to evac all young men over under 14, and pretty much under 14, the old ones you put at signal stations and communication stations on a chair, and the young ones that are capable of fighting, you train up fast to fight and put them in a group of older men or groups of older men, and the ones that are mentally handicapped and not capable of basically of fighting, you put them working earthworks, trenches, repairing roads that are bombed, repairing anything bombed. You have to have working personnel, construction personnel. But that linear first line of defense, you're gonna have multiple army groups, uh, subdivided into divisions covering your whole frontier defensive line. Each army group's gonna have a division headquarters, operational headquarters, and each group's gonna have mobile operational reserve units. I call them firefighting units because they do the same thing firefighters do. If there's a fire, a firefighter will get put fire out. If there's a firefight in a breach in your defensive line, those operational reserve units will go seal the breach and they'll counterattack. Which, like I said, I think over and over I keep trying to hammer that in. That if you're attacked, you stem the breach, seal it off. Don't worry about the troops that got through and counterattack the offensive army. Then you just basically the troops that got through are cut off from ammo and supplies, and they're doomed. You mop them up with another operational reserve unit, force them in a pocket, and they either surrender or face the alternative of mass grave. They die. But first and foremost, you want supremacy of the air. You don't want your air bases and inner city installations getting bombed. So you want supremacy of the air. via the aircraft you have and the SAM missile sites you have, and handheld SAM missiles. SAM missiles are surface-to-air missiles. I don't even think they make the Stinger anymore. That's what we trained the Afghans to use against the Russians in the 80s. They might have a new model of the Stinger, but there's a FHG-88 the Swiss make. It's pretty accurate in bringing down a low to medium flying fighter or military transport or observation plane. And you want to establish supremacy of the skies over your own country. That's first and foremost. After you've gathered intel, even before you've gathered intel, once you see enemy planes flying in your airspace, you want them shot down, point blank. You don't want them having any kind of freedom in your skies. You have to maintain air superiority at all times, at all costs. And that means if you got to send out 5 outdated jet fighters to take down one modern tech fighter, you do it. And that line, that isn't a static line. It should bend. It should be elastic. It should bend forward. If you want to push your troops forward and make a bulge towards the enemy, or it can be pushed backwards in the rear and let the enemy make a bulge. You kind of maybe sucker them in, let them make a bulge, then reestablish that linear line and cut that bulge off of the enemy and make him into a pocket with your operational reserves, and therefore you eliminated a lot of enemy at once in one quick strike move. So the biggest part of defensive operations is elasticity and freedom of movement. And like I said, the elasticity, you don't want to keep a static line. You want that line flexible. It might end up looking wavy halfway through the conflict or during the conflict at some point. It might end up looking like a mountain, one-sided or the other, or a valley with bulges in it. But you want to keep the line as best you can and not worry about the bulges. Like I said, it doesn't have to be firm and static. It has to be elastic. And, you know, that's why you have those divisional operation motorized units to stem those breaches in your line, cut off corridors for army groups to advance and hit you from behind. And that's the biggest thing of defensive operations, is having those operational mobile defensive units. And one day they might travel 200 clicks north, conduct operations to stem a gap and counterattack, stabilize that area to the front, and then the same day drive back 150 clicks south to stabilize another section of the front, counterattack. You might employ several divisional operational units at once, north, south, southwest, to stem breaches and counterattack. You got to have enough divisional operational firefighting units to handle the job and maintain any gaps or corridors that are forced by the enemy. That's what the enemy wants to do, is force that corridor, breach, and gap, and basically divide your line of defense, which inherently divides your army groups. And you don't, as Heinz Guderian said, you don't punch someone with 5 fingers open, you punch them with 5 fingers closed. So when you go to the counterattack, you hit them with everything you got. And you hit them hard and you hit them fast. And you try to inflict as much loss as you possibly can on the counterattack. and if you want to gain as much ground and create your own bulge, running into their offensive line, putting them basically on the defense. Um, some, some scenarios that an offensive action becoming defensive, just in off the head, is Vietnam. We went in as an offensive action, and after the Tet Offensive of '68, ended up fighting a defensive war. Afghanistan went in as an offensive action, and we're now fighting a defensive war. And just touch on those two conflicts. You can't impose your beliefs on a people not willing to accept them. I mean, they're going to fight to the last man. You can't impose one country's customs, beliefs on another. And George Bush made the mistake of designating the U.S. military as the world's police force. And the U.S. military is here for one reason, and that's to protect this nation against foreign and domestic enemies, not to operate as a world's police. Going back to defensive operations, after you gain air supremacy, and are positive you have air supremacy, you want multiple parallel lines running up and down your defensive front with intersecting 90-degree lines where they can move supplies, ammo, new troops, food, water, all the basics to those frontline defenders. After enough's enough, you know, if you've got a company that's been fighting 24/7 for a month and a half, you eventually want to give them some sort of R&R and replace them with another capable company, fill their spot and fill their defensive role while the original company's taking their R&R, because a man's a man and he can be pushed to his limit, but you know that limit breaks, and when it breaks, he breaks down. When he breaks down, the machine breaks down, and when the machine breaks down, the war's lost. So it's a lot involved. You need to have a constant. That goes back to air supremacy. You have constantly having supplies brought in from your inner city to your defensive lines, and you have to anticipate losing ground. That's why you have to have already prefabricated defensive lines set up. You might have a second fallback line, a third fallback line. You might have 10 fallback lines. And when you're falling back, or when you're outnumbered, you want to close the width of the defense you're trying to cover to avoid being encircled and pocketed. You need to shorten the width, and that provides a better defense by shortening the length you're trying to defend. Like I said, it's strung out. Your troops are strung out. Your resources are strung out. When you can close the width of that line, you can employ more troops per click, more resources per click than you can along strung out line. I kind of backtracked a little bit on this video blog, but I'll keep on. Defensive operations are much more important and more complicated than offensive operations, because defensive operations actually involve offensive operations, but the same can be said because offensive operations involve defensive operations. And operations go down to a tactical level, which is the last, what I'm going to talk about next. And then after tactics, because I'm operations tactics specialist, I'll I'll try to touch on strategy and strategic stuff, but that's the least I know about. It's for the generals to decide, and usually, unfortunately, the politicians. But the main goals of the defensive line, establishing air supremacy, using the topography to your advantage, um, cuts in mountains, mountain passes, or topography advantages, rivers, topography advantages, forest topography advantages, because they all hinder the offensive enemy's capability of moving fast. They slow them down, and you use the terrain to your advantage. You know, a mountain pass, you can hold an army group up with a mountain division. A riverhead, you don't want to allow the enemy to create a bridgehead to build a bridge to get more and more supplies, more troops, more armor across. You want to constantly attack anywhere an enemy's trying to start a bridgehead, which goes back to freedom of mobility and elasticity, and forest areas. You know, those are areas where you can really camouflage, hide, and you got to force an enemy to pretty much by man to snuff you out. And they get snuffed out as much as your enemy defenders do, because they're in a forest. They've never been in before, and they're on a path. It's booby trap, possibly coming up on an ambush, which gets to a tactical level now, so I need to quit talking about ambushes. But yeah, defensive operations in a nutshell is elasticity, flexibility, freedom of movement, and control of the skies, air superiority. I guess I'll try to wrap up defensive operations this week. It's taking longer than I thought, but I took a day off, so I don't know. Hope all you guys have a great July night, and if you're on a vacation yet, hope you have a great vacation. And just to report again, defensive operations, you want to move your civilians back, gather as much intel on the attacking army as possible, numbers of armored units, numbers of aircraft, any intel that's accurate you want. There's a lot of bunk intel. You know, the days of the movie 5-man infiltration team, they're over. That don't happen. If 5 men try to breach an enemy HQ or installation, they're not gonna fight their way out. That's movies. Movies glorify war. War is nothing to glorify. War is nothing but people being animals and death. I know everybody like that American Sniper, but I've actually been pinned down by an enemy sniper where we couldn't get wounded back, and every time somebody try to go grab a wounded, they get shot. So I think snipers are as low as they go, but they serve their purpose in a defensive capacity. Not an offensive capacity, but a defensive capacity. And pretty much a sniper, if you're not using him as a defensive capacity in warfare, all he is a stone-blooded assassin. So, alright, I guess I'm done with part whatever of defensive operations. I'll continue tomorrow. I'll have to get up early in the morning and take care of some personal stuff. Today, I'm kind of freed up. I don't know what I'm going to do, but y'all be cool.